easier easier for people to access information that we have. So we'll be able to have this recording and our speaker slides afterwards, and they'll be posted on our website. But with that, the Health and Wellness Group, which is co-chaired by Harriet and Bonnie Yatabi, they have been the ones putting this together with our speaker, and I'm going to turn this over to Bonnie to introduce
Awesome.
Danny.
Well, thank you. Well, kudos go really to Harriet because she's our political and social activist that is really bringing very timely um, issues to us from a health and wellness committee. We're devoted to really ensuring as much as we can for our seniors and our communities that they can remain in their homes living safely and healthy. And it's not just physical, it is, of course, financial, etc. And that's why we thought today bringing in Danny Kasserman, who is a phenomenally well qualified. You've seen in her bio, and I'll just read it quickly. She's been a staff attorney in the Elder Justice Unit at Beth Tzek Legal Services in LA. She's a Santa Monica native, a UCLA law school graduate, and she has been representing low-income clients seeking elder abuse remedies, including restraining orders, et cetera. Some very delicate topics. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Danny to take over so we can have the maximum amount of time. If you all would be so kind as to mute your phones just in case you get a music starts to play or your phone rings, and then we can unmute at the end and take questions. And don't hesitate to put any questions you have in the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat during Danny's presentation. So with that, Danny, welcome, and we thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me, and this seems like a great group. I love to see folks politically engaged and civically engaged, especially as they age. That's so important. So thank you for being here. I plan to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. And as everyone mentioned, you'll get a copy of the slides. So don't worry about, writing things down. You'll be emailed a copy if you'd like. And that has, my organization's contact information and also some of the resources that I'll be sharing. So I'm going to start out by talking about financial scams, which is a form of elder abuse. Whoops. And I can present for hours just talking about all the different scams, but I'm not going to do that today. So I just kind of want to highlight some of the ones I'm seeing most frequently so you can be on the lookout. And I hope that these are familiar to you. Maybe you've fallen for something or, a neighbor of yours came to you. And yeah, this is just kind of to educate yourself and protect yourself for the future. So I'm seeing a lot of different investment scams. These scams tend to target a very well-educated audience, folks who have assets. I have spoken to doctors who have been victims of this scam. I have spoken to lawyers who have been victims of the investment scam, bankers even, like people in the financial industry. And basically how an investment scam works, it takes so many different forms, but it gets you to give a scammer money or fraudster money in promise of some kind of reward, either more money, that's usually how an investment works, but sometimes there's property investments or other promises. A lot of these scams can really stretch on for years with like promises of repayments and extensions. Some of them involve asking you to make purchases in Bitcoin or even investing in types of Bitcoin. I've heard a lot of those scams recently. So remember, just with any sort of investment, never keep that a secret. You want to talk to people in your life. And in this case, I came across recently the one actually involving a lawyer who was the victim, she only realized that it was a scam when she tried to bring her friend in on it, thinking it was a great deal for her friend to invest in too. And that friend is also a lawyer and did a little bit more research, and that's when they realized it was actually a scam. So, do your research, do your due diligence, um, invest with trusted parties. Companies always get a contract in writing. Make sure that these are vetted uh, people who are reaching out to you, and tell other people about it, because sometimes they'll recognize some red flags that maybe you missed. Then there's a lot of imposter scams going around, people impersonating government agencies, an old friend that you went to elementary school with, an old teacher of yours. Um, Obviously, the grandparent scam is still really popular, where someone's imitating to be your grandchild or another relative in need of help. The one I wanted to highlight is banks, because with AI, artificial intelligence, which I'm going to touch on in the next slide, the scammers have gotten really good at impersonating banks and other financial institutions. And to me, that's really the most worrisome, because they can replicate websites and make it seem like you're actually talking to bank officials. And that's where I've seen people just lose everything, transfer, their whole bank account over to a scammer. And usually in those cases, the bank is reaching out to you saying, you've been defrauded. We will save your money, but you have to move it to this other account. And unfortunately, they're just so convincing now, and they get you to reveal all of your numbers. Sometimes they already have a lot of your personal information, which makes you trust them even more. So definitely be wary of any financial institution contacting you, and you want to be sure that it's actually the bank or investment company or pension company. And so I always recommend, if you are reached out to by, whether it's the IRS or Bank of America, Wells Fargo, just say, you know what, I'll call you back, and go to your credit card, log on to your bank account the way you always do, go in person even, and contact that bank through a trusted number, like on the back of the credit card or through their website. And they can tell you whether, there is in fact some kind of fraud going on, or that was a scammer. And then I'll skip over jobs. That's probably not as relevant, but there's a lot of work from home scams to look out for. And then IT computer scams. I know that technology has gotten so complicated. I need help with technology sometimes. I was just complaining about my internet before this presentation started. And so it can be really scary and confusing, if you get a pop-up about your computer being hacked, or a company pretending to be Apple reaches out to you about some fraud with your iPhone. All of these sorts of scams are getting really common. Again, because AI is making it so that these scammers are so believable. And always with the IT computer stuff, I recommend a hard restart instead of clicking on any links to, you know, fix a computer hack. Never pay any money. You always just want to manually try to shut off and restart your computer or phone and see if that fixes the issue. And then if that doesn't work, you can reach out to a trusted, store, whether it's the Apple Store or Verizon, if that's who your phone is with. And then there are also third-party businesses that help with tech issues, but don't fall for someone calling you from one of these businesses saying that there's a problem that they will help. So I've mentioned AI a little bit, and I just want to talk about how scammers are using it. Whoops. So they can actually clone voices to sound like a loved one or famous people. So we're seeing a lot of scams where people believe that, it's Dolly Parton calling them, or, other country artists are really popular, politicians sometimes. They also are able to create fake videos and pictures that make their stories as scammers seem more realistic and believable. I had one client who was a victim of a romance scam, and the person she thought she was talking to was a veteran, which is, we see a lot of romance scams involving veterans. And they had sent a photo of what they look like. And she said, well, I want to make sure you're real. Let's talk on the phone. And her daughter was with her, and that's how I kind of know about this. But essentially, this person, the scammers are so good, they can make a photo seem like it's talking. So it did seem like on the surface, like she was talking to this photo that they alleged they were, this handsome older veteran. And yeah, so that kind of technology is making it really hard to parse out reality from fantasy. And then, as I mentioned, it's just also really easy now to make fake websites that make you think you're on the real thing and that it's really your Bank of America account that's been hacked. And also, when I first started up at SEDIC 10 years ago, I would give presentations about scams, and I would go over tips and show emails and kind of like highlight different issues with email soliciting money. And it was a lot easier because the scammers weren't as smart back then. There were a lot of spelling mistakes in the email soliciting money, and there were a lot more obvious signs that it was a scam. And unfortunately, that's just not the case anymore. Scamming people is a probably billion-dollar business. So they are investing in technology. They're investing resources to make everything seem as real as possible. They have hundreds of people in call centers whose sole job it is to keep you on the phone as long as possible and get you to give them money and establish relationships. So I do think in this current state, it's become a lot harder to be savvy and avoid scams. And just remember that these are financial crimes. So, like I said, the smartest people in the world are victims of scams, and you are a victim. It is a crime. So these are just some other common red flags with scams. If the ask for money is in the form of Bitcoins, going to a Bitcoin ATM, buying gift cards, reading gift card numbers off the back of the gift card. Oh, I swear my computer's moving without me. Wire transfers, never send a wire transfer to anyone unless you know them and you verify that it's who you think it is. So, if you're sending a wire transfer to your grandson who's supposedly, in trouble in Mexico and needs to be bailed out, first hang up and call your grandson and make sure that, the situation is accurate, or, call their parents. Is your grandson even in Mexico right now? Probably not. And yeah, just wire transfers in general, there are some legitimate reasons people send money via wire if it's internationally, for example. But again, just make sure it's someone you have a history with, you've met in person, and never send it to an account where you don't know the person. And then we're seeing a lot of peer-to-peer payments coming from apps like Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are kind of the main ones. And the problem with all of these forms of payments is that there aren't as many consumer protections in place, and typically the money's gone right away. Like once you buy Bitcoin or send money through Bitcoin wallets and whatnot, uh, it's poof, it's gone. There is no freezing it, there's no getting it back. Law enforcement can't access your Bitcoin wallet or anything like that. And similarly, gift cards, once you read that number and the scammer enters it, that money's disappeared as well. So that's why these are certainly red flags if anyone is asking you for payment. And I do just want to note a lot of times with scams, they're not right away asking you for money. They're smart criminals. They're building rapport. It, it can sometimes be a long haul, where they don't even ask for any money until a month into the relationship, a month of phone calls and, establishing that social connection. So just because someone doesn't, ask you for money right away or ask you to invest right away, don't let your guard down. And then finally, I just want to talk about some typical tactics used since we don't have time to go over every scam and they're changing by the second. So I don't even know every scam in existence, but they try to get you to make a quick decision. They don't allow you time to think about it or consult with others. They say, no, 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 this offer is over now, or you're going to lose all your money if you don't act this moment. You don't have time to, call your spouse or call your child or call your investment broker or whoever to double check. That's what they'll make you think. So that's a common tactic, as well as telling you explicitly not to tell other people or even trying to undermine others in your life. So we see that a lot with romance scams, where the romance scammer tries to turn the victim against their family, who's just trying to help them and be cautious, but they'll say, it seems like they just are after your money, or it seems like your kids are just greedy and want your house. Why don't you give your house to me and I'll protect it for you. Those kinds of things. And then also super common, which is basically every single scam, is they're reaching out to you, right? They're sending an offer via text, email, social media, phone that you didn't ask for. So it's the bank calling you saying, uh-oh, huge fraud going on. You need to move all your money immediately. Or it's a text message from FedEx saying, hey, I think that there was some fraud in your account. Click here to confirm that it wasn't you who made this purchase. And then I hope you know this, but caller ID is not reliable anymore because of something called spoofing, where scammers can make it seem like it's Bank of America calling you when it's not. It's just their random call center numbers. So definitely be wary if, it says IRS coming up on your phone or your bank. Again, I would just recommend not picking up. And if you really are concerned, like I said, go to the back of your bank card, go into the bank, or log on to your bank's website the way you normally do and contact them and, talk to a customer service representative or a member of the fraud team to see whether there actually is an issue. But don't get on the phone with them and start giving away your information. Okay, I'm done talking about scams. So now I'm going to talk about some prevention tips for elder financial abuse, which, like I said, scams are under that umbrella. They are a type of financial crime, but also elder abuse is perpetrated by family members, by loved ones. You know, it's a child stealing your credit card. It's a neighbor accessing your mail and signing up for their own credit card using your personal information. Okay, I know this slide is overwhelming. We're going to go through these steps quickly, and again, you'll have access to these slides. So the first tip is to protect your private personal information, also called PPI. I swear I maybe have this on a weird setting where the slides are moving. I apologize. Uh, Computer safety includes, you know, only using trusted internet connections, using password managers, not making every password the same, not making every password the name of your dog plus your birth date. You know, there's a lot of best practices that I don't have time to get into. You can use password management software or two-factor authentication, which is where for certain, you know, sensitive websites like banks, when you log in, it'll also text you and you'll have to enter a texting code. So if if you're given the option to add two-factor authentication, I would recommend it. Again, these things are all annoying. I get it. I'm with you. I hate all the passwords and how we have to think about these things, but it is smart because we see all the time the hacking that happens and, you know, the way that our personal information gets into the wrong hands. Review your financial statements regularly. This is probably my number one tip. Again, annoying, but if you can monthly review all of your bank statements, credit card statements, and look out for any unauthorized charges, withdrawals, or transfers, that is going to be so crucial because there are a lot of consumer protections in place with financial institutions. And there's the Electronic Funds Transfer Act that is consumer protections for credit card purchases, but any fraud needs to be timely reported. And when you sign up for a credit card or, you know, open an account with a bank, you agree to their policies and procedures. And a lot of times they are very explicit that fraud must be reported within 30 or 60 days. So that's why reviewing everything frequently is so crucial. And if there is a problem, you're going to want to report it right away to that financial institution. Checking your credit report is a great way to protect against identity theft, to make sure that people are not using your identity for their own purposes, whether it's to take out a loan or open a credit card, any debts that you do not owe. Oops. And this website annual credit report offers free credit checks. You can do it quite frequently now. They've changed it. It used to be like only twice a year was free. Now I think it's kind of unlimited. And you can request a copy of your credit report by mail, by phone, or online. So, you know, you don't need to do this every month, but I would say like every few months, probably at least once a quarter is a good idea. And if you do see any problems on your credit report, you can always contest it, you know, do a little bit more digging, get some facts about what that debt is, try to get paperwork, report identity theft, and also freeze your credit. So freezing your credit prevents other people from then using your personal information to take out a new loan or anything like that. And for a lot of older adults, in my opinion, unless you're a renter and you're planning on moving, it's not a bad idea to just have your credit frozen and just unfreeze it when necessary. So like if you're gonna buy a new car, you can unfreeze it. But otherwise, it's just kind of a good protection to have because there's no reason why you probably need to have your credit open to do new credit cards or things like that. Unless there are reasons which, are personal, that's fine. But I do recommend older adults typically just have their credits frozen and then unfreeze them as necessary. Using bank alerts is a great tip for protecting yourself against fraud. If you can kind of set these a number of different ways. So you can say, hey, I want to get a text message if I make any purchase over $500 or over $1,000. And that way, kind of unusual activity is spotted as soon as possible without you constantly needing to review your statements. It's still a good idea to check your statements every month, though. And then I always want to tell people about view-only access, which I think is great because I'll cover this in a minute, but we don't necessarily recommend that you add, let's say, like a kid to your account as a joint account holder because that's going to give your kid full access to all your money. And we'll talk about some alternatives to that. But I do think it can be a good idea to appoint a trusted person as view-only access. If you know that you're someone who isn't great about checking your statements monthly and you want just someone to kind of be able to look at what's going on without making changes. So that wouldn't give them power to, let's say, withdraw funds, but it could let you know that, it could give a trusted person access to spotting suspicious activity. So you can consider that, and all financial institutions should have that option now. Prepaid credit cards, I recommend in limited situations. Normally, credit cards are actually better and offer you more consumer protections, but prepaid credit and debit cards can be useful in cases where maybe the older adult has cognitive impairment and you want to have that person be somewhat independent and still, go to the corner store or the grocery store and pick up a few things and whatever, eat out at their favorite takeout place. But you don't want to give them a credit card that allows them to be taken advantage of and go to Best Buy and make a $2,000 computer purchase. So for people who have some cognitive impairment and want to maintain independence, I think a prepaid credit card can be a great option to protect them against scams. As I mentioned, credit cards are a great option in terms of consumer protections. These are just a couple websites where you can learn more about other types of scams. As I mentioned, adding someone as a joint account holder can be useful if that person is helping you pay bills, but I don't recommend it because they can also just take all your money from you because they'll have full access to your account. Instead, we do recommend powers of attorney as an alternative. So a power of attorney is a legal tool where you can where you can appoint a person to manage your money and you get to choose what powers to give them, banking only, or the ability to take out a loan on your house, or the ability to manage your Social Security funds. And you can also specify when that power goes into effect. So a lot of the ones I'm preparing for people, they just say immediately as soon as possible, this person can help me manage my money. But, like I have a power of attorney that I don't need in effect right now, but I have it listed so that if I lose capacity, then X person will take over managing my finances. And you can always revoke this if, the person you appointed proves to be untrustworthy or you change your mind. And even though a power of attorney has fiduciary duties to you, and technically you can sue them if things go wrong, you still want to be really careful to appoint someone you trust because they are going to be able to access your finances. And the reality is, like, a lot of times, once the money's gone, even if you sue them, which is a terrible process, I don't recommend, you're not going to get that money back. So just be really careful about who you appoint. And then I'm not going to go into detail about conservatorship, but conservatorship is appropriate when there was no planning done in advance and a person loses capacity and someone needs to make decisions for them. It's a court process, it's quite involved, and ideally you don't need to do it, even if a person, loses capacity due to injury, accident, something like a stroke or dementia. Ideally, you already have a power of attorney in place so that it's not necessary. But sometimes conservatorship can't be avoided if you didn't have planning, or in complicated cases of elder abuse, like if the power of attorney is misusing their authority and someone else needs to step in. So those are things Beth Zedek is happy to discuss with you if you have questions about powers of attorney or conservatorship. Okay, and I am basically out of time, so I'm going to just let you guys read through the reporting on your own when you have a copy of the slides. This gives you kind of the rundown on who and how to report. And I always want to highlight these two organizations that can help with reporting, because reporting on it can be really overwhelming if you're a victim of a scam. So these are two great organizations that are free and can help you. And then this also includes information to include in your report, which again, I'll let you read through. My favorite slide is the support groups for victims, because I don't think we talk enough about the emotional impact of being a victim of a financial crime or scam. It can be really hard on you mentally. It can impact your self-worth, your sense of self-worth. And I hate to see that because it's just so common, these scams, and I can't emphasize enough like how they impact everyone, young and old, PhD educated, rich, poor. So, get help if you've been a victim and you're feeling kind of down about it. Definitely reach out to these groups. Also, if you are a family member of a victim of a scam, that can be really hard too, dealing with kind of the aftermath of maybe losing everything financially, or some of those feelings that arise when, like, let's say your spouse lost everything to a scammer and now you're going to lose your house. And these, unfortunately, are very real situations. So please seek help. And then this is our contact information at Beth Zedek. We have a lot of different services, different teams. I'm on our elder justice team. We have a restraining order clinic, which the information is here for that. But we also help with advanced planning for low-income individuals, and yeah, a whole slew of services. So definitely look at our website. We have online intake, we have phone intake, and we're happy to answer questions that way. Okay, I think I did it in 30-ish minutes, Bonnie. Oh, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
I'm here. I think
Oh,
that's
there's
great.
Terry.
Let's see if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Danny. I'm trying to see if I can unmute. See if Bonnie, why don't you type your question because I'm not sure how to. What about weird friend requests on Facebook?
Yeah, I think this comes up a lot. I know my dad has accepted some very questionable friendship requests, and I've talked to him about it. And, I think on the surface, people are like, well, why does it matter? It's just a friend request. But I'll tell you why it does matter because one, you might be posting personal information to your Facebook account that then those friends have access to. And you have different privacy settings available on Facebook. So sometimes you're just sharing with friends or sometimes even more publicly. So I worry that, when you're accepting these sort of weird requests, then they're seeing your personal information. They can use that to their benefit. If they know when you're taking a trip, they can try to target you for a specific scam knowing that you're kind of out of your element, you're on a different time zone, and you don't have your normal things and routine in place to vet issues. So that's one concern. And then there's also the concern that they could be a scammer, right? And I am seeing a lot of cases where people very compellingly like say that they know you. They say, "Oh, you don't remember we went to so and so elementary," and they may only know that because they see you're part of that Facebook group, right? And they're using the information available to target you for a specific scam, and that's how it starts. They build this relationship, and eventually they're requesting money for a great investment opportunity, or it's a romance scam. Okay, other questions? Yeah, the postal packages, scam stuff, I get them too. And again, like a lot of times with these unsolicited text messages or emails about package stuff, their goal is to get you to then like click a link or, it's always, it's not just what it seems on the surface. So I just recommend ignoring those. Don't click on anything. You can, if it's easy to do, report it as spam, but just be really careful not to like click a link or reply.
Are you able to see the chat, Danny?
Yeah, so Marie's asking a question. You got voicemails from Walmart, saying there's a purchase on your account. How do you report it? You don't have a Walmart account. Yeah. So again, like I'm glad you recognize that this is a scam. But you could see how if you did have a Walmart account, you would be like, oh, maybe there is a problem. Uh-oh, like I better click here to find out more. And if that were the case, I would advise you, don't click, don't respond to the email. If anything, you could log into your bank account however you normally do and see if there's any legitimate problem with with your charges or your card being used. In terms of reporting, I did include some reporting agencies, but for something like this, I personally wouldn't take the time to report it because I'm lazy. But you could certainly block their number, especially if they're calling from the same number. That would be one step. But you can check out the sort of reporting sites I listed, like FTC and IC3, but it's just kind of like, do you want to spend your time that way? I do recommend reporting, certainly if you've been a victim of a scam, because the information you provide can sometimes lead to law enforcement action. And very rarely there are settlement funds that, like when law enforcement has a big win and they're able to, get some money back from these criminals. If you have reported to be a victim of that particular scam, there's a possibility for you to get a little money back. So if you've actually lost money, I do recommend reporting, but kudos to the good Samaritans out there otherwise, but it's not me. So okay, let's see. Bonnie's recommending, yeah, that you block any callers not in your contacts. I think this can be a good idea. Sometimes actually my organization, we struggle because we're trying to get in contact with people and we're not a known contact. And then like we can't reach people or, it just goes straight to voicemail. Usually I think is how it works. So it kind of depends, but I don't think it's a bad idea, certainly. And probably doesn't do any harm. So yeah, that would certainly cut down a lot on the scam calls. Yeah, Marie seconding blocking callers not in your contacts. And yeah, I think for most people, it's probably a good idea. Um, you know, you just then like save your doctor's numbers and like numbers that I don't normally save, but would be important that you want to get calls from. A lot of scams lately from Amazon saying fraud happened on your Amazon account. So that's super common. Again, just don't reply or click on anything related to those. If you're worried about it, you can always just log on to your Amazon account the way you normally do and, look at your search history or check your credit cards and make sure that, everything was authorized.
Other questions?
We can unmute. How about those weird emails that say you have unclaimed assets? And it's, from, an account you didn't know you had. I think that's also all scam I don't open any of them.
Absolutely.
So many people are going
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. And I think, I get it. Like people are curious, right? Like, oh, like what do I maybe have? And that's kind of like one of their techniques they use to try to pull you in. I would, since those aren't emails on your email provider, there should be an option to mark it as spam. And I definitely recommend doing that, but absolutely those are all scams and you just want to be careful not to click on anything.
Yeah, you touched on, I think every one of us have had at least 4 of the things you've mentioned, because I'm sitting here nodding my head. Yep. And it's so easily
Yeah.
taken in. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that Apple one that you mentioned where you get it on your phone and it seems so real, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the tech scams and the bank ones to me are the scariest because we're so connected to our devices now. And obviously, the threat of losing money, through your bank is really scary. And, that's how they get you is it's all psychological, right? They're asking you to act right away, and you're not able to use your kind of normal reasoning skills to like think through something because you're in that flight or fight response mode where you
Yeah.
can't, process things.
And thank you for mentioning the issue of isolation, because there are some of these scammers, to your point, that they'll make a friend of a senior who is very isolated,
Absolutely.
and all of a sudden, bad things happen. And it happens a lot, a lot.
Yeah,
So,
something happened to us at Starbucks. Somebody started talking to us and telling us about how he can make more money, and you give us so much money and it's going to multiply. And he has on his computer, he's working on his computer, he's showing us graphs and everything. It seemed like a really nice person. Well, we actually gave him money, and we had to get a lawyer friend to write a letter to him and say that, we're going to take some action. And he actually sent us back, it was 5,000. He
Oh,
said,
you're lucky.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Harriet, because again, yeah, and that's why I like to mention the investment scams, especially if I know it's an educated audience such as yourselves, an engaged audience, because that's who's the victim of these scams is very smart people who, are sold on an opportunity, and sometimes, it's really obvious, like too good to be true. Like, you're not going to just get like 5 new cars for free, right? But there's a lot of more subtle scams where like it does seem like a good deal, but like not too good that it's like so suspicious. So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, the way you said it was slow to happen. It took a while. Next week he was there, and oh, we're going to meet next week at Starbucks.
Mm,
and and he just talking and showing things and telling, how his past, his history of
yeah.
how he started in investing and moved his way up and so forth. Yeah, very convincing.
Good actor.
Yeah, and you see how they, get you through these emotional connections and especially people who are isolated, as Bonnie was saying, and, they aren't in regular contact with their family. Maybe their family lives on the other side of the country, or they never married, they don't have children. And so they're very vulnerable to, people paying attention to them. And that's why I always recommend one of the best things you can do to help prevent scams in your community is, look out for each other, right? Share what you've learned today. If you have a neighbor that lives alone, check in on them and like mention, oh, today I went to an interesting presentation on scams. Hopefully it was interesting. And, share a little bit and, just keeping that social connection as much as possible with as a community, I think can go a long way to prevent these scams.
Thank
this has been terrific, Danny. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Any
so
other
much.
questions? Don't be shy. This is not usually a shy group. I think they're just taking all the information in.
A lot
Of course.
Oh, great.
One I will mention to my poor little next door neighbor who is now deceased, but during COVID, and we didn't realize she was losing it. She had her kitchen redone. Oh my God, the nightmare. They took such advantage of her, and it took over a year, and it never really got completed.
Oh.
And she did the same thing with her backyard. She put the fake grass in, and her sons were like, Mom, and it was too late. And, again, they did a horrible job. But it was just, I wish I'd spoken up sooner and told her 3 sons who don't live immediately in the
Yeah.
area. But
Yeah. And we do handle those sort of contractor fraud cases at Bethsedic where, you've got unfinished or incomplete work, or they changed the terms of the contract or didn't give you a contract in your language that they negotiated in. There's all sorts of protections that are in place to try to help people in those situations, but there's also a lot of best practices that you can use when hiring so that, you don't get yourself into a position where, you paid everything up front to a contractor. Like, you should never do that. You should pay credit card when you can, get vetted referrals, all that stuff. So yeah, we do presentations on contractor scams as well, because that's kind of its own category of scams that can impact homeowners.
And people who've lost their homes in the fires. So
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I can't personally thank you enough, Danny. This has been terrific. We'll keep an eye on your organization and the help it may need in the coming months with any kind of funding impact that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have the slides and the recording up on our website by next week so you can share it.
All right.
Great.
Thank
you so
everybody.
much.
This has been
Nice to-
fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody else that's come.
All right.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.